Marissa sat across from me at the kitchen table, her leather-bound planner already open. A pen poised like she was leading a board meeting. Darren dropped his briefcase by the chair and pulled out his phone, scrolling with his thumb, barely lifting his eyes as she began her list. "School drop-off is at 8 sharp, Marissa said, her pen scratching across the page. "Pick up at 3. Colton needs his allergy medicine every evening. Lunches should be packed the night before. Don't forget to add extra napkins. The twins always make a mess." She kept talking, as though I weren't there. Darren nodded once, more at his screen than at me, a quiet murmur of agreement escaping him when she mentioned soccer practice on Thursday. Neither of them paused to ask if I was available, if I had plans of my own, if I even wanted to be the one running this show. "The fridge is pretty empty, so you'll want to run to the store," Marissa continued, flipping to the next page. "Homework needs to be done before Sunday night. Oh, and make sure the twins bring their blue jerseys last time they forgot." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that assumed I would simply agree, because hadn't I always? I sat with my hands wrapped around a cool glass of water, the condensation slipping down to dampen the coaster. My chest tightened with each line she recited. The expectation in her voice wasn't harsh, but it was final. It carried the weight of routine, the ease of people who believed their mother's time was endlessly available. Finally, she shut the planner with a soft thud. "We booked a last-minute anniversary cruise. Just us. We leave Monday." The words weren't offered as a request, but as fact. Darren slipped his phone back into his pocket and glanced up at me as if the matter was settled. I set my glass back down and looked at them both. No polite smile this time. Only the calm certainty of someone who had already decided what came next. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of their words settling like dust in a still room. Then I let the corners of my mouth turn upward. Not the polite smile I had trained myself to wear, but one born of something different, certainty. "Perfect," I said. Steady and clear. I already booked my own trip for that week. For a moment, nothing moved. Marissa's pen stopped midair, her hand suspended above the planner as though her body refused to process what she had just heard. Darren finally looked up from his phone, his eyes wide, as if I'd spoken in another language. "I'm sorry." What Marissa's voice sharpened, clipped. She blinked rapidly, like I had missed my cue in a play she thought I knew by heart. "I'll be gone," I repeated, slower this time, "from June 10th through the 17th. You'll need to handle things however you like." The silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. Darren shifted in his chair, his mouth opening as though to speak, but no words came. Marissa pressed her lips together, the planner still open in front of her, all her neat little lists suddenly useless. I stood and gathered the empty glasses from the table, the clink of glass against coaster loud in the stillness. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of guilt pressing on my chest. Instead, there was something lighter, steadier, when I returned from the sink. Marissa was still frozen, staring at the page, while Darren tapped his fingers against the table as though waiting for me to take it back. I didn't. I folded the dish towel neatly over the sink handle, turned, and looked at them both. My decision was set, and nothing in their faces could shift it. I wasn't always this firm in the early years. Saying yes felt like the most natural thing in the world when my first grandchild was born. I practically begged for every chance to help. I baked slice and bake cookies and let tiny hands press the dough flat before sliding the trays into the oven. The sweet smell filled my kitchen, and laughter echoed off the walls like music I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. At bedtime, I'd curl into the recliner with a child in my lap, reading the same book 3 times without complaint. The rhythm of their breathing would soften until sleep claimed them, their heads resting heavy against my shoulder. Those quiet nights were treasures, reminders that family was built moment by moment. I drove through Savannah's oak-lined streets with a car seat strapped in the back, proud of the role I played. People would glance at me in the grocery store with a toddler in tow, and I would smile. Grateful to be close. Grateful to be needed. Helping wasn't a burden then. It was love in its simplest, truest form. I sewed Halloween costumes, packed picnic baskets for Forsyth Park, and kept a basket of board books by the recliner for long afternoons. I was proud to be the one they turned to, the one who could make life a little easier for my daughter and her young family. Back then, every yes felt like opening a door to more joy. I didn't notice when the requests began to stretch. I didn't notice when the gratitude began to fade. I only knew that being included mattered. And I clung to that feeling even as the shape of it began to change. The shift didn't come all at once. At first it was simple, an afternoon here, a Saturday there. I was glad to help, glad to see the children, glad to feel useful, but slowly, the pattern stretched beyond what I ever imagined. A quick errand turned into a full day. A day became a weekend. Weekends slid into entire weeks. There were nights when the phone rang after 9. Darren's voice brisk. "We'll drop them off in a bit. Sitter canceled. We'll pick them up tomorrow." Tomorrow sometimes meant 2 days later. I'd answer the door in my robe. Children half asleep in pajamas. Backpacks half zipped. Promises of just until morning hanging in the air. I stocked the fridge without thinking. Milk and cereal vanishing faster than I could keep up. School lunches required little juice boxes and allergy-safe snacks. Gas disappeared as I crisscrossed Savannah for pickups and practices. Medicine bottles refilled on my card when a cough wouldn't quit. Each expense felt small in the moment, but together, they began eating into the savings I had carefully set aside for my retirement years. Late at night, after the children finally settled, I'd sit at the table surrounded by unfinished homework and a basket of laundry waiting to be folded. My phone buzzed with notifications, and out of habit, I'd open Instagram. There they were, Marissa and Darren, poolside in Miami, smiling over drinks with umbrellas, captions full of hashtags. Much needed break. Couple time. Other weekends. It was Hilton Head. Darren with a sunburn. Marissa in a wide-brimmed hat. Both glowing like their life was effortless. Meanwhile, my kitchen sink overflowed with plastic cups. My washing machine spun late into the night, and my knees ached from bending over tubs of soapy water. I hit the little heart on their pictures, because that's what mothers do. But each time I did, something inside me dimmed a little more. The truth pressed heavier with every load of laundry, every late-night drop-off, every smiling photo that erased my effort. They weren't noticing. They weren't grateful. They didn't even see me anymore. And the more invisible I felt, the more I wondered how much longer I could keep saying yes. Spring break was supposed to be 2 days. Marissa dropped the children off on a Sunday night, bags only half packed. Instructions rushed at the door. "We'll be back Tuesday," she said. By Tuesday morning, no word. By Wednesday, a text. "Running late, you don't mind." Right by Thursday, I had stopped checking the clock. The days blurred together in a rhythm of cooking, cleaning, and calming restless children who wanted to know when their parents were coming back. 6 days stretched before me, heavy with fatigue. On the 4th day, Colton woke up, flushed and glassy-eyed. His forehead burned under my hand, and his little voice trembled when he whispered, "Grandma, my belly hurts." I bundled all 3 children into the car, drove across town to the pediatrician, and sat in a waiting room full of young mothers balancing infants on their hips. I was the only grandmother there. When the nurse asked for payment, I handed over my card without hesitation. At the pharmacy, another bill. I texted Darren, paid the copay, will keep the receipt. His reply came seconds later, a single thumbs up emoji. No thank you. No concern. Nothing. That night, when the children were finally asleep, I shuffled into the kitchen, my body aching from the day. I spread the receipts across the table. Groceries, gas, medicine, school supplies I had picked up when a permission slip came home crumpled in a backpack. The pile looked small, but I knew the weight behind each slip of paper. I pulled out an old spiral notebook from the drawer and wrote 3 words across the top of the page. What I've given. The list came quickly. Field trip money, sneakers when toes poked through, lunch kits, juice boxes, allergy medicine, gas for pickups, electricity bills higher from the constant loads of laundry, nights of sleep traded for bottles of cough syrup and late-night homework, my peace, my strength, my time. By the time I stopped writing, the page was full. I sat back and read it over, my chest tight. It wasn't a record of love, it was a ledger of labor, invisible and unpaid. The decision didn't crash into me all at once. It settled quietly, like a truth I had always known but never admitted. Something had to change. And this time, it would. The morning after spring break ended. The house was still heavy with silence. Crayons without caps lay scattered across the table. Socks stuffed between couch cushions. Cereal boxes left open on the counter. I looked around and realized I had spent 6 days living in a space that no longer felt like mine. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and typed cruises from New Orleans, June 10th to 17. Dozens of options appeared. Glossy photographs of blue water and bright decks. One caught my eye, a 7-day route through the Gulf. Stopping in Cozumel and Key West. The price made me hesitate. But then I thought of the receipts I had stacked in my drawer, the ones no one else ever saw. For once, the money would go towards something for me. I entered my card information, clicked Book Now, and printed the confirmation. My hands trembled, not with guilt, but with a kind of relief I hadn't felt in years. From a drawer, I pulled out a plain white card. In neat handwriting, I wrote, "This home will be unoccupied, June 10th to 17. Wishing you peace wherever you gather." I folded it carefully and set it aside. When the day came, I packed a single suitcase, 2 summer dresses, 1 pair of sandals, a sun hat, sunscreen, 2 paperback novels I had been meaning to read. That was all. No toys, no spare pajamas, no snacks, nothing for anyone but me. I zipped the bag closed and set it by the door. The sound final and steady. For the first time in a long while, the weight I carried belonged only to me, and I was ready to walk with it into something new. The morning Marissa and Darren were set to leave. I was already miles away, watching the highway slip by on my drive to New Orleans. My suitcase sat steady in the back seat, the note firmly taped to the front door of my quiet house. I didn't have to imagine the moment they arrived with luggage. 3 restless children, and their voices full of casual instruction. They expected me to be waiting. Apron on, house prepared. Instead, they found my words staring back at them in black ink. "This home will be unoccupied, June 10th, 17. Wishing you peace wherever you gather." The first text came quickly. "This isn't funny." Then another. "Where are you?" Minutes later. "You're selfish. We can't cancel now." The phone buzzed in my purse as I walked across the boarding ramp. The cruise ship rising high against the blue sky. I didn't answer. Once in my stateroom, I set the phone face down on the little cabin table and let it buzz until it fell silent. That evening, Mrs. Caldwell from across the street left me a voicemail. Later, when I listened, her voice carried equal parts shock and amusement. "Bertha, you should have seen it," she said. They stood there forever, kids crying, Darren pacing up and down, Marissa hollering into her phone. After an hour, they finally packed it all back into the car. I heard them say they were heading to her mother's condo. Lord help them. It's barely big enough for her alone, let alone 5 more. I pictured it clearly: air mattresses crammed into corners, children whining for space, adults snapping at each other over whose fault it was. The chaos was theirs to carry now, not mine. That same morning, I sat on the ship's deck with a cup of coffee, the sea stretching endless and calm before me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel pulled in every direction. The only noise was the low hum of the ship and the sound of gulls overhead. The weight had shifted, and it no longer rested on me. By the second morning, I had found a rhythm that belonged only to me. I rose when I pleased. No alarm, but the gentle roll of the waves against the hull. Breakfast was laid out in shining trays: eggs, fruit, warm bread I didn't have to knead or slice. I carried my plate to the open deck and ate beneath the sun, watching the horizon stretch wider than any obligation ever had. Later, I joined a group gathered for bingo in the lounge. We laughed over silly cards, strangers turning into companions for an hour. A couple from Georgia shared stories of their grandchildren, and I listened without the weight of comparison. Just simple enjoyment. No one asked me to run an errand. No one handed me a list. Afternoons were quiet. I stretched on a deck chair with a paperback, reading chapters without interruption. No coughs to check. No homework spread across the table. No voices calling my name. Just the steady rhythm of the sea and the rustle of pages in my hand. Evenings felt almost decadent. I sat at a table where dinner arrived without my effort. Shrimp arranged neatly. Bread baskets refilled before I even noticed they were empty. I savored dessert without thinking about dishes stacked in the sink. As the days passed, something inside me loosened. I was not just Grandma, the babysitter, the stand-in parent. I was Eleanor again, a woman with her own voice, her own time, her own peace. When the ship pulled into its second port, I realized I hadn't once thought about grocery lists or permission slips. What surprised me most was how little I missed the exhaustion I had once convinced myself was love. When I returned home, the quiet felt different. It wasn't heavy or lonely. It was mine. I stood in the living room, looking at the stacks of toys, the folded bedding piled high in the closet, the high chairs tucked in the corner. They were relics of a role I had carried too long, reminders that my house had become an extension of someone else's needs. The next morning, I loaded my car with boxes, high chairs, booster seats, bins of plastic toys, extra blankets and sheets I had bought for overnight stays. At the donation center, I watched the workers unload them onto carts and wheel them away. My arms felt lighter with each trip from the trunk. When the car was empty, I sat for a moment, realizing that space had finally returned to me. Back at the house, the rooms looked wider, cleaner. For the first time in years, the space felt like it belonged to me again. I brewed a cup of tea and sat in my chair, breathing in the stillness. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Marissa lit the screen. "So you'll babysit next time?" Right. The words landed with the same old expectation. But I didn't flinch. I typed slowly. Each letter, steady no. "But I hope you find a plan that works." I set the phone down without waiting for her reply. The boundary was set, and for the first time, it didn't carry guilt. I sipped my tea, looked around my house, and felt something I hadn't in a long time: calm that belonged only to me. In the weeks that followed, I began shaping my life into something that felt like mine again. One afternoon, I stood in the doorway of the spare room, its walls still marked by crayon smudges and stickers from years past. I bought a gallon of sage green paint, the shade I had always liked but never chosen. With each stroke of the brush, the room transformed, calm and warm, a place that belonged only to me. I signed up for water aerobics at the community center. The first morning, I worried I might feel out of place, but laughter filled the pool. And before long, I was joining in. I left with sore muscles and a lightness I hadn't felt in years. At the library, I joined a book club, slipping into a circle of voices debating plots and characters. For once, I was simply Eleanor, not Grandma on duty. When autumn approached, I booked a week in a lakeside cabin in North Carolina. The listing promised quiet mornings, hiking trails, and a porch swing overlooking the water. I didn't ask anyone's permission, didn't check anyone's schedule. The decision was mine alone, and that was enough. One evening, sitting in my newly painted room with a cup of tea, I thought about the years I had given so freely, the yeses that had drained me. I felt no bitterness, only clarity. Choosing myself was not selfish. It was living. I closed the notebook that once held a list of everything I had given and left it in the drawer. Ahead of me was something far greater than a record of sacrifice. It was a life open and waiting, and this time, it belonged to me.